Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am super excited for today's video because today I'm going to be doing a full-on review of the new-ish Netflix TV show series Indian Matchmaking. But before we get into it, as always, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you do like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up, and yeah, let's just get right into it. Okay, so Indian Matchmaking, this TV show has been all over social media. Just every time I opened up my phone, especially in the past month, I have been seeing memes, I have been seeing reviews, I have just been seeing so many things about this TV show. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about it today. I know that there's so many differing opinions on, was the show representing the right things? Was the show like 20 years behind its time? Whatever the case is, I'm going to be breaking down my thoughts, and of course, as always, you all can let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Okay, so one of the first things I just want to talk about is the things that I found so interesting, which were the values and the things that people looked for in their significant other. That was the part that blew me away when people were saying like, oh, I want someone who is over 5 feet 3 inches, or I want someone who likes to travel. What? What? There were just so many things, when, Seema Auntie would be asking, all of the contenders, if you will, like, so what do you look for in a significant other? A lot of the things were so superficial and so just, surface level that it kind of took me by surprise. But I will say that it is matchmaking, and you're not going to say like, oh, I want someone who respects women, or I want someone who knows the difference between, confidence and ego, because obviously how is Seema Auntie going to know those things unless she spent time with that person for like a few years? For a matchmaker, you really only are going by the bio data. It's not like Seema Auntie knew these people like personally. So I mean, to me, it kind of made sense, like, okay, if they're 5'3" or whatever the case is, it's almost like it's easy for her to find those qualities. But I will say, on that same note, watching the TV show really made me realize how much people don't know what they want. And not only just like in a significant other, but like they don't even know what values they can bring to the table, let alone trying to pinpoint what values they want in a significant other. Okay, so now I'm actually going to talk about matchmaking itself, because as I mentioned, when I went online, I saw that there were so many comments and thoughts about arranged marriage and matchmaking and the stigma that comes with matchmaking, as well as things that I do feel are problematic. So the number one thing I want to say when it comes to matchmaking is, I think what a lot of people don't understand, especially nowadays, of course, it is a privilege if you have this, but it's a choice. Okay, it's a choice if you want to if you want a matchmaker. It's a choice if you want to get arranged marriage. And when I say it's a choice, I'm saying like, it's not like you just meet the guy and that's the guy you're going to marry. You have a choice to pursue and get to know him, or you have the choice to be like, no, I'm not feeling it. Whatever the case, the point is you have a choice. And I understand that there's some that don't. So I think that's the biggest misconception and the biggest stereotype that's kind of, attached to arranged marriage and matchmaking is, oh, you're forced to marry a guy, blah, 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 blah. And that's just so far from the truth. The other misconceptions with arranged marriage and matchmaking, I believe, is that so many people think like, oh, so someone else is going to choose for you. It's so interesting how growing up, we allow our parents to choose, what schools we go to. We allow them to influence what friends we hang around. We allow them to, make sure that we're eating well. But when it comes to someone that we're going to marry, we're like, oh my God, step away. It's all going to be me. So I think that's a big misconception. Obviously, our parents are more wise and can see things that maybe we can't see. And I'm not just saying just because they're our parents, but, just perspective. If you have 3 or 4 people looking at the same situation, they're going to pick up on different things. So I think when, I don't know, I feel like it's just interesting. Like when a matchmaker is going to bring someone to you, they're probably going to see something that you might have not pursued on your own unless you had someone introduce you to that person. So it's really no different, you know, from if you met your significant other through a friend or through a coworker. That person's technically a matchmaker, if you will. So to me, there's not really much of a difference. But yeah, I just it saddens me that there's so many negative stereotypes with arranged marriage and matchmaking. And yeah, there really shouldn't be, unless the person themselves that's, you know, doing the matchmaking or doing the arranged marriage has like negative intentions and is forcing it upon someone, or is purposely bringing like bad contenders to the table. One thing that watching Indian matchmaking really made me think about is how normalized, you know, online dating and dating with an app is versus something that's not that normalized in Western culture, which is matchmaking and arranged marriage. Yet somehow matchmaking and arranged marriage is looked at as weird or forceful or taking away my rights. I don't understand. I feel like that's just kind of a flaw with the South Asian community, is we tend to kind of shine so much light on Western norms and accept it, but we're so hard on our own traditions and our own, not values per se, but our traditions. And I'm not saying that I'm not out here promoting matchmaking and promoting arranged marriage, but I definitely want to be devil's advocate and say that why is it that if the Western world tells us that something is weird, we accept it and say that it's weird? Like, why wouldn't we say like, no, it's actually not weird. It makes sense to have those who love you be your matchmaker instead of a randomized app that's finding people based off of the location and what they might be seeing on their bio data or their, you know, their personal data thing that, you know, they could be making up, as opposed to if your parents know the family or your friends know that person personally and then they introduce you. That's a little different. So, you know, I'm sure that there's success stories on both sides. In fact, I know that there are success stories on both sides. My whole point is I just don't understand why there's such a negative you know, stigma to arranged marriage. It's a very normal thing in over 70% of the world besides the Western hemisphere. So it's very normal to get introduced to a guy or even your friends through your family or existing friends. It's very normal. With that being said, I will say that as much as I'm always going to promote being proud of where you come from and holding on to your roots if it is part of your identity, we still have to be aware enough to recognize prejudices in tradition, or sexist views in tradition, or just oppressing views in tradition. So that's where I'm going to bring it back to the Indian matchmaking show, where I just noticed that there was some instances where I was just like, oh, why does the guy get the pass but the girl doesn't, you know? And I feel like, you know, one of the biggest things that I noticed is Human, who went through like 150 bio datas and ignored them all, which is totally up to him. There's no shame in that. This is your life. You have the right to reject 1,000 people or one person. No one can shame you for that. But I will say that when I forgot her name, I'll put it here, but when this one girl rejected 2 or 3 guys, then Seema Auntie was saying that, oh, she's difficult, she's, you know, stubborn, she can't find someone. Whereas with Human, she did say that he was stubborn and all that, but if anything, I felt like there was just more pass, like 150 people he said no to compared to the other girl who rejected like 3 guys. Like, dude, that was just something that I noticed that did, you know, spark something in me. And I've heard that so many times. I mean, just in my own community, like girls that get proposals and they're not interested, the first thing that they hear isn't typically like, oh, why? Like, you know, like let us know how we can bring someone that's more suitable for you, or let's talk about it. What didn't you like? It was like, stop being picky, or you're being too nitpicky. Like, of course we're going to be nitpicky. It's our future. And I don't understand why that comment even exists. If anything, shouldn't the aunties and uncles say like, be nitpicky about the values that you look for in someone? You know, I'm not saying be nitpicky about superficial things. Like, you know, I get some people are all about, you know, first impression, how someone looks, and that's fine. That's up to you. But in my personal like opinion, I'm nitpicky about the things that the relationship is going to, you know, stand on. Loyalty, love, and trust. Those are things that I'm really going to be looking for. And I know it's hard to look for. I don't have the answer for you, but obviously that's not going to happen in just like 1 or 2 meetings when you meet someone. So anyway, that was a bit of a divergence. Let's talk about representation. So obviously, I'm super excited that Indian Matchmaking made it on Netflix. That's just more representation. But of course, the question comes, good representation versus bad representation, tokenism, misrepresentation, blah, 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 blah. So here's my take on it. Indian Matchmaking did exactly what it was meant to do. It was a matchmaker. She had 5 or 6 clients that she had to match with someone else. And some of her clients were American, like from America, and some were from India. So there was diversity there. But, you know, I think, and I've mentioned this in my other review with Never Have I Ever, I feel like because minorities, South Asians, have had zero good representation on Netflix and just in general in cinema and in this industry, we put so much pressure on TV shows to do every single thing right. It's almost like, and I get it, it's like if in 1 decade there's only been 2 TV shows with Indian or South Asian, you know, talent, obviously we're going to be like, wait, but what about putting in someone who's gay, or what about putting someone who is, you know, South Indian, or what about putting someone who's darker skin versus lighter skin? There's all this pressure, and I get it. I am all there for us. But I will say, we have to admit the TV show sparked so many interesting dialogue. And at the end of the day, the fact that I'm even making this video is showing that this TV show is only going to bring in more representation. It's only going to bring in higher quality, you know, Indian TV shows on Netflix. So yeah, I mean, I get the whole, you know, it was inclusive of everyone. Indians and India is also such a diverse like identity. You know this. I mean, there's over 300 languages, let alone skin colors and heights and, you know, religions. And India is a big freaking country. It's the 2nd largest country in the world, you know. And then on top of that, there's so many Indians outside of India. So, you know, there has to be some sort of empathy and realism in terms of one TV show with only 8 episodes is not going to cover everything, and there will be flaws in terms of what we determine as inclusive versus not inclusive. And just to give perspective, if we even look at, you know, American TV shows like Friends or Seinfeld or all of those, like, you know, 90s, early 2000 TV shows, they had zero diversity. There were a lot of problematic things in those TV shows. There was a lot of tokenism. There was a lot of, you know, microaggressions. There was just a lot of issues with those kind of shows. But you have to even admit, a lot of shows now, even though it's a gradual process, there is progress. There is diversity coming through. I'm not saying it's ideal, but there are things that are happening. So the fact that an Indian TV show, the first 2, Never Have I Ever, and now Indian Matchmaking, were already so ahead of their time for being one of the first Indian TV shows, minus, you know, some of the others. I don't know. I think that's really impressive. And you all already know my opinion on Never Have I Ever. So it wasn't my favorite show. I didn't think it represented me personally. But, you know, you guys can watch that review. Okay, so with Indian Matchmaking, would I ever do it? Probably not. And I have my own reasons for that. But, you know, again, never say never. I never know what I'm going to end up doing. But overall, I thought it was a really good show. It was reality. It portrayed reality, at least my reality. You know, as much as we can scoff at, you know, how, you know, it was said like, oh, I would rather have a fair girl than a dark-skinned girl. Wouldn't we rather expose our communities areas of improvement than hiding them. I think there's one thing to say like, oh, we should be inclusive of all shades of skin tone within, South Asian women. And then there's one thing to just edit a TV show and completely take it away. So I will say that although the TV show did show me that there were so many things that are problematic, people still care about those things is crazy to me, but at the same time it's not. Again, if I have a friend group that talks about these social issues, or if I'm following Instagram pages that talks about these social issues, obviously I'm going to be woke on that topic. But if I don't, and if it's never talked about, then not only is the show normalizing it, but it doesn't really bring a solution, or it doesn't really highlight it as an issue. So that's the one thing that I feel like, I don't know if the show should have done that, but I really, really love how so many South Asians after the show were talking about it. And I think that's bigger than anything. It's really up to us and using our social media platforms to stand up and say like, it's so freaking pathetic to, say that you want a fair girl, or even using that as a compliment, like saying like, oh, she's so nice, she's so fair. Like, to me, that's just utterly disgusting. And it tells a lot about the person's values, because even though it's normalized in their head, they've basically let the colonizers win. And they've just there's just a whole plethora of things with that are problematic. But I think that it's really up to people who watch the show and the show itself after they've launched it, and when they do like press reviews or Q&As, like they should be addressing those types of topics. I think the biggest difference with shows back in the day versus now is like, you don't just put out a Netflix original series and boom, it's done, it's never going to be talked about again, things are just going to be on repeat and replay. No, these people get interviewed, they all have social media accounts, people are going on IG lives, YouTube lives, they get to interact with the audience. And I feel like that's where these things should be addressed. Like, oh, what were your thoughts on saying this in the show? Or what were your thoughts on in the show when someone said that being fair is preferred, or that's what they would want? So I think nowadays, the show itself can be as raw as ever, but most people, especially with Netflix originals, with Indian TV shows, at least with Never Have I Ever and this one, people are engaging in conversations on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, even like in social media in general. So I think that although it might be heartbreaking, or it might be a disappointment that the show itself didn't address the problematic things within the show, for all we know, people didn't even realize that they were problematic, and now it's our job as consumers, as well as their job post launching the show, to talk about it now that it's being brought up so many times. Ooh, it is humid today. But yeah, those are kind of like my jumbled up thoughts on the show. I mean, overall, I liked the show, but at the same time, I can like a show and still have issues with, very, very big things to me, and I'm going to speak out about it. The reason I like the show is because it keeps resurfacing so many amazing topics that I feel like as South Asian Indians we don't really talk about as much, besides with our own friend groups, because there's no representation, there's no media, there's no movie about these real things. So I think it's really important for me to say that although the show was entertaining, there were a lot of things that came out of the show, but then at the same time, there was good representation. I mean, honestly, you can't deny it. Seema Auntie is a very good representation of a lot of people and how they are. So, we can't just attack someone and say like, you suck, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. We have to be smart about these things, especially with Indians. Like, there's just so many layers to this topic, and yes, you can be blunt, but I would rather do this conversation in a strategic way and actually know that there is a potential that the person receiving it can potentially change or open up their eyes to why this might be problematic, as opposed to being blunt and not strategic and might turn them away from it forever, and they might just never open up their eyes because now we've permanently closed their ears, if that makes sense. I hope that you all enjoyed this video. I know my thoughts were kind of all over the place. I honestly did put some bullet points of what I was going to talk about today, and then yeah, I just kind of went off. So let me know your thoughts on the video. As I mentioned, I will see you all in my next video. Thank you, everyone. Bye.